Eagles Nation. The season didn't just end in disappointment, it ended with clarity. And that clarity hit the Eagles organization and its fan base hard after the loss to San Francisco in the wildcard round. There will be no Super Bowl defense, no chance to run it back, and no way to ignore what went wrong anymore. This offseason officially begins with one unavoidable truth. The Eagles wasted a year where everything was set up for another championship run, and the offense was the reason why. When you look at the roster, the investment, and the expectations, what happened feels inexcusable. Philadelphia entered the season with one of the most expensive and talented offensive units in the NFL. Paired with a Super Bowl caliber defense under Vic Fangio, all this team needed was a competent offense to give itself a real shot, and it never came close to delivering that consistently. The focus now is squarely on offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo, and around the league, the expectation is that a major change is coming. People inside NFL circles believe the Eagles will move on from him in an effort to jumpstart an offense that stalled week after week. The numbers tell a brutal story. The Eagles averaged just 9.5 points per game in the second half this season. With Jalen Hurts at quarterback, an offensive line loaded with talent, and playmakers like Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert, that statistic should be impossible. Instead, it became the defining trait of this team. 6 times this year, the Eagles failed to score a single touchdown in the second half. That's not bad luck. That's a systemic problem rooted in preparation, in-game adjustments, and coaching. Against the 49ers, the issues were magnified under the brightest spotlight. San Francisco's defense was depleted, cycling through backup linebackers and ranking as one of the worst pass-rushing units in the league during the regular season. Even then, the Eagles' offense came out of halftime and completely disappeared. Drive after drive told the same story. 3 plays and a punt. 4 plays and a punt, settling for field goals instead of putting the game away, and ultimately turning the ball over on downs when everything was on the line. Philadelphia had multiple chances to close that game out. They let the 49ers hang around, and in the playoffs, that's fatal. What you saw was the difference between an elite, well-coached team led by Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh and a poorly coached one led by Nick Sirianni and Kevin Patullo. What makes this sting even more is that the warning signs were there all season. A.J. Brown said it back in November, that you can't keep putting a band-aid over the problem and expect it to magically fix itself late in the year. Jalen Hurts echoed that sentiment after the season-ending loss, admitting they never found a groove all season long and that the same issues from week 1 were still there when the year ended. Even Nick Sirianni, in his own words after the game, admitted the offense followed the same pattern over and over again. A solid first half, followed by poor coaching and execution in the second half. Penalties, lack of rhythm, and an inability to adjust became the norm, not the exception. At the center of it all is Sirianni's disputing making. This isn't the first time he's made this mistake. He internally promoted an offensive coordinator who wasn't ready in 2023, and he did it again by elevating Kevin Patullo, his close friend, to run the offense during a Super Bowl window. Throughout the season, there were opportunities to make a change, to shake things up, to acknowledge that it wasn't working. None of that happened. And when the season was on the line, in a 4th down situation while trailing by 4 points in scoring territory, the play call was 4 vertical routes against 4 deep defenders. It was icily defended, offered no real chance to succeed, and perfectly symbolized how disconnected and ineffective the offensive approach had become. Now, the Eagles are at a crossroads. Kevin Patullo appears to be on his way out, but the conversation doesn't stop there. Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman have to be embarrassed by how this season ended, especially for an organization that has always valued offense and spent more on that side of the ball than any other team. Sirianni has now made the same internal promotion mistake twice, and it would not be surprising if his future is being actively discussed behind closed doors. With the roster still loaded and expectations still sky high, the decisions made over the next few weeks will define the direction of this franchise moving forward. This is where I want to hear from you as Eagles fans, because this offseason feels pivotal in a way that will shape the next several years. Do you believe moving on from Kevin Patullo is enough to fix what we just watched all season long? Or do you think the problems go deeper than the offensive coordinator and force the Eagles to make an even bigger decision at the top? The reason this conversation keeps circling back to Nick Sirianni is because once you peel away the surface, the offensive collapse doesn't exist in a vacuum. Kevin Patullo was the play caller, but Sirianni was the one who empowered him, protected him, and kept him in place despite overwhelming evidence that the offense was broken. This wasn't a late-season slump or a matchup-specific issue. It was a year-long identity crisis for a unit that never evolved, never adapted, and never punished defenses for their weaknesses. When your quarterback is saying publicly that the offense never found a groove all season, that is an indictment of the entire structure, not just the guy holding the play sheet. Around the league, the expectation is clear that the Eagles will bring in a new offensive coordinator for the 2026 season, and the names being discussed underline how serious this decision is. The Eagles can't afford another internal experiment. They need someone who has done this at a high level, someone who can walk into the building with credibility and immediately command the room. Brian Daboll is one name that fits that profile. He has history with Jalen Hurts from their time together at Alabama, learned under Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, and played a central role in developing Josh Allen. That familiarity with elite quarterbacks and complex offenses matters when your window to win is still open right now. Todd Monken is another name that stands out. His work in Baltimore helped Lamar Jackson play some of the best football of his career, and his offenses have consistently shown balance, creativity, and adaptability. Davis Webb, currently a pass game coordinator and quarterbacks coach, is also highly respected in league circles after working under Sean Payton, one of the most influential offensive minds in modern football. Even names from the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree have been discussed, with the appeal being modern concepts, motion, and creativity. Though there are fair questions about how those systems translate in every environment, the common thread here is simple. The Eagles need an adult in the room offensively, not another developmental project. But even as these coordinator options are debated, the larger question looms over the NovaCare complex. If Nick Sirianni couldn't fix this offense all year, couldn't adjust within games, and doubled down on a failed internal promotion, how much confidence should there be that he suddenly has the answers now? This is where the conversation shifts from coordinator talk to head coach accountability. Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman have always been aggressive when they believe the standard isn't being met, and this season ended far below the standard set by a roster this talented. Sirianni has now overseen 2 straight offensive coordinator misfires, and that history matters when evaluating his future.
If the Eagles decide that a clean reset is necessary, there is an elite option sitting out there. John Harbaugh's name has surfaced for a reason. He has deep ties to the Eagles organization, having coached in Philadelphia from 1998 to 2007, mostly under Andy Reid. He knows Jeffrey Lurie well, understands the culture, and brings nearly 2 decades of head coaching experience marked by consistency, preparation, and toughness. His resume speaks for itself: a Super Bowl championship, 6 division titles, 4 conference championship game appearances, and a reputation for fielding disciplined teams that are ready for big moments. During the height of the Patriots dynasty, the Ravens under Harbaugh were one of the few teams that consistently stood in their way. What makes that scenario intriguing is how naturally the pieces could fit together. Harbaugh paired with a strong offensive coordinator like Todd Monken, Vic Fangio remaining as defensive coordinator, and a roster that is already built to win now. From a head coaching opening standpoint, it's hard to imagine a better situation. A committed owner, an aggressive general manager, financial resources, and a loaded roster don't come along often. That's why this offseason feels so heavy. The Eagles are not rebuilding. They are recalibrating, and the margin for error is thin. Every decision from here on out will send a message about how seriously this organization takes the failure of 2025. Moving on from Kevin Patullo feels inevitable, but whether that move is enough is the real debate. The Eagles have to decide if the offensive disaster was a correctable mistake or a symptom of deeper leadership issues. Either way, this is a defining moment. Get it right, and the Eagles can quickly reestablish themselves as legitimate Super Bowl contenders. Get it wrong, and this season will be remembered as the beginning of a longer slide than anyone in Philadelphia wants to admit. The uncomfortable reality for the Eagles is that this offseason is no longer about fine-tuning or marginal upgrades. It's about restoring credibility to the offensive side of the football. When a team spends at the level Philadelphia does and still looks lost for entire halves of games, that shakes the foundation of trust between the coaching staff, the locker room, and the fan base. Players know when a system puts them in positions to succeed, and they also know when it doesn't. Over the course of this season, frustration leaked out in comments, body language, and post-game quotes, and that usually only happens when issues have gone unaddressed for too long. One of the most damaging aspects of this collapse is that it wasted prime years from cornerstone players. Jalen Hurts never looked fully unlocked within the structure of this offense, often forced to operate without rhythm or easy answers when defenses adjusted. A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith went through long stretches where they were taken out of games entirely. Dallas Goedert became an afterthought in critical moments. Saquon Barkley, brought in to elevate the offense, ran into stacked boxes and predictable looks far too often. This wasn't a lack of talent. It was a lack of imagination and adaptability. Defenses knew what was coming, and the Eagles never proved they could consistently counterpunch. That's why the next hire, whether it's an offensive coordinator under Nick Sirianni or a potential new head coach altogether, will define how the league views the Eagles moving forward. Philadelphia has built a reputation over the years as an organization willing to be bold, willing to pivot when something isn't working, and willing to prioritize winning over comfort. Standing pat or making another safe, internal decision would contradict that identity. The fan base feels it, the locker room feels it, and opponents absolutely feel it when a team hesitates at moments like this. What's also at stake is the perception of accountability. If Kevin Patullo is dismissed, that will be seen as the minimum response. The bigger question is whether the Eagles believe Nick Sirianni can still lead a championship-caliber operation after presiding over an offense that regressed week after week. Head coaches are ultimately judged on solutions, not intentions. Sirianni acknowledged the problems publicly, but acknowledgments don't win games. Fixes do, and the Eagles went an entire season without finding one. This is why the coming weeks matter so much. Interviews, internal meetings, and hard conversations will shape the direction of this franchise. The Eagles can still turn this into a quick reset instead of a prolonged decline, but only if they're honest about what failed and why. The roster is still good enough to contend. The defense is good enough to win in January. The missing piece is leadership and clarity on offense, and that has to be resolved decisively. Now it's on you, the Eagles fans, because this is your team and your investment every Sunday. Should the Eagles trust Nick Sirianni to hire the right offensive coordinator and fix this, or is it time for a bigger change to reset the standard before this Super Bowl window closes? There's also a human element to all of this that can't be ignored, because coaching decisions don't happen in a vacuum. When a head coach repeatedly ties his future to assistants he personally trusts, especially close friends, the margin for error shrinks dramatically. Loyalty can be a strength, but at this level it becomes a liability if it clouds judgment. Inside a locker room filled with veterans who know their championship window is now, players notice when accountability feels uneven. They notice when production doesn't match opportunity, and they notice when problems are acknowledged but not corrected. Over time, that erodes belief, and belief is everything in January football. What makes this moment so tense is that the Eagles are not far away. This isn't a roster that needs to be torn down or patiently rebuilt. This is a team that needs clarity, structure, and leadership on offense. One smart hire, one clear philosophical shift, could completely change how this team looks by midseason next year. But the opposite is also true. One hesitant decision, one familiar name chosen for comfort instead of competence, could extend these same problems into another year and waste yet another opportunity. The front office now has to decide how aggressive it wants to be. Howie Roseman has never been shy about making bold moves when he believes the moment demands it. Jeffrey Lurie has shown time and again that sentimentality won't outweigh performance. That history is why so many people around the league are watching Philadelphia closely. The Eagles are setting a tone for what failure means inside their building. Is it something you tolerate and hope improves, or something you confront head-on and eliminate? This offseason will answer that question. Whether it's a proven offensive coordinator brought in to overhaul the scheme, or a more dramatic change that resets the leadership structure entirely, the message will be loud. Either the Eagles acknowledge that this season fell far short of expectations and respond accordingly, or they gamble that the same leadership group can suddenly find answers it never found before. For a fan base that lives and dies with every snap, that gamble feels risky. That's why this moment feels heavier than a typical playoff loss. It's not just about losing to San Francisco. It's about how the Eagles respond to being exposed, to having their weaknesses laid bare on a national stage. Championship teams respond with urgency and honesty. Average teams hesitate and hope. The difference between those two paths is often decided in February and March, long before the first snap of a new season. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Do you believe this offense can be fixed with the right coordinator under Nick Sirianni, or has this season shown enough to justify a bigger reset at the top before the window closes? Another layer to this situation is how quickly the league adapts compared to how slowly the Eagles' offense adjusted. Defenses figured Philadelphia out early in the year, and once that happened, the answers never came. You saw the same looks, The same concepts, the same struggles in September, October, November, and all the way into January.